Welcome to the Worthiness Rebellion, a sacred revolt where you unlearn self-betrayal and rise into the truth that your worthiness was never up for debate. It's time to speak, time to lead, and time to take up space. I'm your host, Lindsay Morlock. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Worthiness Rebellion. I want to kick off this week by circling back to something I stated in the last episode of the podcast. In that episode, I referenced that our circumstances do not need to be different, that things don't need to change in order for us to be truly happy. And after I recorded that episode, I went outside for a walk. I got some air. And as I was walking, I said to Spirit, there is a lot of suffering that is currently happening in the world. I found myself thinking about the person who has just lost a loved one, or someone who is dealing with a difficult medical diagnosis, or people who are experiencing and or on the receiving end of crimes being committed against humanity, or people who are struggling because they don't have a home, they don't have food, they don't have the financial stability or security that they desire, people who are struggling to find a job, or people who might be buried under any variety of experience of hurt or harm or just general pain that happens as a function of being human. And so I said to Spirit, I really get what you're saying, that the grass is always technically greenest right where we stand. I think one of the things that they were pointing to as we talk about this is that we have, as human beings, this ability to play the when-then game. When this happens, then I'll be happy. When I get the job, then I'll be happy. When I pay off my debt, then I'll be happy. When I am in some other circumstance, time, place, space, then I'll be happy. And what it does is it keeps us in the future. It keeps us in a feeling of lack. It keeps us in a vibration of scarcity. And what I want to acknowledge is sometimes it's really hard to be where you are, because there is a lot of human suffering going on in the collective right now. And whether you are someone who is suffering as a function of your own self-esteem and your own pain and whatever, emotional experience you might be having, or you are moving through pain as a function of what is happening collectively in humanity right now, I want to honor that the grass doesn't always feel greenest right here, right now, because sometimes it's not very green. So I want to first start by clarifying what Spirit meant by that statement, because there's a really important distinction here. So first, let me share what the grass is greenest right here is not. When we say the grass is greenest right where you are, this is not a mandate to feel grateful when you're in pain. This is not asking us to bypass grief or rage or terror or loss or any of the myriad of emotions that we might be experiencing at any given point in time. It is not a denial of injustice or trauma or oppression or someone's material reality. It is not a suggestion that people who are suffering just need a better attitude or just need a better perspective on their life. And it's not a claim that your present circumstances are acceptable or even meant to be endured. So let's just honor that that is not what the grass is greenest right here is about, right? Because if spirituality ever tells someone who is grieving or someone who is starving or someone who is living under violence that their pain is a perception problem, that's spirituality that has absolutely no soul. So let's just firmly put all of that on the table first. And what spirit is really speaking to when they say, be here now, where they say that your conditions externally don't need to change in order for you to be here now, be happy now? It's a spiritual teaching behind presence. But the spiritual teaching about presence is not about liking your reality. It's about not abandoning yourself inside of whatever your reality currently is. So being present with your circumstances is not, oh, this is fine. This is great. I'm grateful for all this pain and suffering. No, that's not presence. Presence is, can I be here with myself in this pain? And that distinction is everything. And here's why. The spiritual truth behind this is that suffering actually increases when we abandon ourselves in our own pain, right? Pain is unavoidable in human life, but self-abandonment is avoidable. So when people say, I need to be somewhere else in order to be okay, or I need my circumstances to change or be different in order to feel okay, what you're really saying is, I cannot stay with myself in this pain, in this present moment. And that's the rupture within ourself that spirit is pointing to. It's not the external condition. Spirit wouldn't condone harmful external conditions. Spirit doesn't condone the suffering, right? It's the how do we stay with ourselves in the present pain of the experience? Because being witness to that pain, allowing yourself to be present with all the emotions, all the sensations that come up within your physical body as a function of whatever you're experiencing in your current reality, that is what it looks like to not abandon yourself in the present moment. It's about how do we develop a muscle to stay present with our pain in the moment. So I want to be clear. Being present does not mean you accept harm. It doesn't mean you resign yourself to your circumstances. It doesn't mean that you're passive about your circumstances and just accept what is. It doesn't mean pretending safety exists when it doesn't. Presence means, can you stay connected to your own humanity in the pain, in the suffering? Presence means not dissociating from your body, not dissociating from your heart, not dissociating from your truth. One of the ways we dissociate from pain is by playing that when-then game. We say, when we have money, then we'll feel better. We're dissociating from our current reality by trying to fantasize about a future circumstance that could make us feel better now. But being present means allowing yourself to be fully with the grief, with the anger, with the hurt, with the loss, with the pain, with the shame, right? Allowing yourself to feel your anger instead of internalizing it. Allow yourself to acknowledge your fear instead of overriding it with some sort of toxic positivity, right? We're not talking about transcending your present moment. Spirit asks us to inhabit it, to be fully with it in the moment. And what I've learned throughout my journey is this was really uncomfortable. It was really uncomfortable to learn how to be present with pain in my body. In the very beginning, I couldn't sit with it for very long. Over time, I have developed a muscle to be able to be present with it for longer and longer periods. And that has served me well because now I don't override my present experience. I'm just present with it. And so when we speak to the Worthiness Rebellion and our sense of self-worth, your self-worth does not depend on your circumstances. But your circumstances will change faster when your worth is no longer up for negotiation. Right? So that's very different from just change your attitude and you won't be a victim. You're not a victim. Don't be a victim. That's not it. The Worthiness Rebellion, in moments of real suffering, the rebellion is not about forcing positivity. The rebellion is about being present with your own dignity. And so in moments of real suffering, being present with your own dignity is being present with your own humanity. So that looks like not shaming yourself for wanting different conditions, not spiritualizing away what you need for survival. It looks like not gaslighting your own nervous system. It looks like refusing to believe that if you need help, that makes you somehow unworthy. It looks like refusing to make your pain into a personal failure. The rebellion is saying, this hurts. I'm in pain, and I am still worthy of care, of safety, of support, and dignity right now, even if the world hasn't caught up to that truth. So the reason Spirit emphasizes the present moment, the now moment, even when conditions do not feel good, it's because the present is the only place that you can actually stay connected to yourself, not to bypass change, but to resource it, right? When we dissociate into, well, once this ends, or when I have enough, or after this person apologizes, or if I were somewhere else, when we are dissociating into those scenarios, we lose access to our intuition. We lose access to our boundaries. We lose access to our creative agency. We lose access to our ability to receive help. And most importantly, we lose access to our inner authority. So presence actually restores choice even when our circumstances are constrained. So being present doesn't mean I accept this condition and I'm not going to seek change. It means I'm not going to abandon myself in the process of seeking this change, right? So this is the difference between what moves us to collapse as a function of our circumstances versus what builds resilience. It's the difference between being in survival mode, we dissociate, we're in survival mode. And when we build our inner resourcing, we move ourselves to a place of deep self-trust, right? We can feel grief, we can feel despair, and stay with ourselves to be guided to move. But there is another truth that Spirit said, this is a hard one, but honest, that many people are not just suffering only because of their circumstances. And this is something that, it makes me emotional thinking about, because this is where I was at. Many people are suffering because their pain has no witness. They're suffering because their worth has been internalized as conditional. They are suffering because their needs have been shamed. They're suffering because their grief has been rushed. They're suffering because their nervous systems have been taught to endure instead of receive. And the reason presence is so important is because it's the first place that repair can actually happen, not the last. It's the first. So this is not just about changing your attitude to, ooh, the grass is greenest right here. But it's also about not waiting for life to be perfect before you allow yourself to return to your wholeness. That's why I always speak about worthiness as a remembering, because it's not something that you earn. It's something that you reconnect to. It's something that you remember. It's about staying rooted in your own love, staying rooted in your own humanity, even when the external world isn't there yet. That's not passive. That's what makes change sustainable instead of self-sabotaging. And so if I could distill the bigger learning here into one headline, you don't need different circumstances to be worthy. But reconnecting to our sense of self-worth, staying rooted in our worthiness is what allows you to meet circumstances without losing yourself in the process. And so something that I've learned along my own journey to reclaim my self-worth is, as I remembered my worth, as my sense of self-worth increased, what also increased was my care, my concern, and my visibility for other people's worth. There seems to be a correlation where those two things increase commensurately. And I think there's a bigger message for the collective in all of this with that truth. Because when we ask ourselves these questions, why are people being denied their basic humanity? Well, they're being denied basic humanity by people who are also stuck in their own worthiness wounds, right? People, myself included, are considering right now, like, how do we play our part in changing humanity, in creating the world that we want to live in? The one thing we always have control over is our own healing. And so when someone's worth increases, when you take the time to really work on your own worth, there's a couple things that happen simultaneously. When you increase your worth internally, you stop needing to collapse into your own self-protection. You stop collapsing into your ego. You stop competing for worth. You gain the capacity to witness pain without turning away from it. So from that place, care doesn't shrink, it expands. Sometimes people have the false belief that increasing their self-worth makes them self-centered. That's a myth. That's a myth that says if I focus on myself, I'll stop caring about others, or my actions will communicate that I'm selfish, that I don't care about anyone else. That's not true. What actually happens is the opposite, because when our worth is conditional or fragile, other people's pain feels so overwhelming to us that we actually have to look away from it because we're not resourced to be with it. When our worth is conditional, injustice feels paralyzing. Suffering triggers guilt, it triggers shame or even saviorism. When our worth is conditional, care can become performative. It can become compulsive. You might be trying to fix people. But when your self-worth is rooted, you can see suffering without dissociating from it. You can care without losing yourself in the process. You can take action, you can support without burning out, and you can hold complexity without collapsing into polarity, right? Your system has more bandwidth. Your system has more capacity when your worth is rooted. That's why worthiness work is not spiritual bypass, right? Low self-worth says, I have to fix this. I'm bad, right? There's a shame present there. Healthy worth says, this matters. And because I'm connected to myself, I'm allowed to choose how I respond. I respond from a place of wholeness. I'm not reacting from my ego, right? And that difference is what creates sustainable compassion. It's what creates clear vision, clear moral vision. It creates non-reactive advocacy, and it creates integrity-based action. We are not all here to play the same role for humanity. We all have to play our different parts. But we're not here to be apathetic. We're not here to be indifferent. And we're not here to be detached. And we're not here to be complicit. But we don't know how we're truly being guided and what role we're being asked to play when we are connected to low self-worth. So you might hear me talk a lot about the Worthiness Rebellion being inherently relational, right? Because this work does not lead to, I'm okay, so the rest of the world doesn't matter. It leads to, because I know my worth, I see yours, even when someone else does not, even when the system does not, right? So people doing this work often become more socially conscious, not less. People doing this work develop deeper empathy, but they don't drown in it, right? People doing this work care more about collective harm, not less. And when we do this work, and this is really important, we also refuse dehumanization in subtler forms. We say no to harm that's happening right under our noses. We say no to harm that's happening in our backyards. We say no to harm that happens on a smaller scale so that it doesn't expand to the collective scale. This is why worthiness work is not selfish. It's relational maturity. Because when worth is no longer scarce inside yourself, concern for others stops feeling like a threat. You don't need to look away from suffering, and you don't need to absorb the suffering in order to prove you care. It allows you to ask clearer questions. What is mine to carry? What is mine to respond to? And what is not mine, even if it still matters? That clarity is ethical, it's sustainable, and it's what allows real change to happen without destroying the people who care. So I hope this helps to clarify what I was speaking to in the previous episode about circumstances not needing to change for you to be okay in the moment. Ultimately, when we abandon ourselves in our pain, we amplify the pain. But when we stay with ourselves, hold ourselves through the pain and the suffering of whatever conditions we might be experiencing, whether those are internal conditions or external conditions, your witnessing, your inner resourcing, your ability to stay present with whatever you are feeling in the moment is what reduces the pain in the now. Again, this does not mean that external circumstances are okay, that they don't need to change. But all we have the power of in any given moment is taking control of the moment. And at minimum, we have the ability to not abandon ourselves in the process, hold ourselves through the pain, witness the pain, and then allow the connection to our intuition to understand what is needed to change our circumstances. That is what it feels like to be at home within yourself. And being at home within yourself is to recognize that your worth is not up for negotiation. So staying rooted in your own worth and your own humanity is not about waiting for life to be perfect before you are allowed to be whole. When your worth is no longer up for negotiation, circumstances can actually change more quickly. That is how the grass actually becomes greener. Not somewhere else, but by taking control of your power in this present moment. So, I hope this helps to clarify something that I've been wrestling with since the last podcast, and I'll look forward to chatting with you again next time. Bye for now. If this episode spoke to your soul, I want you to know you don't have to do this alone, but you do have to start with you. Begin with my free quiz to discover which worthiness wound is keeping you small. Then, deepen the conversation by joining me over on Substack. All the links are in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, don't forget, you matter. The Worthiness Rebellion continues.